Hello there, welcome back. Let's do a quick recap from Monday. Cara stood in that room on Wednesday morning with 34 slides and absolutely no destination. And she's not alone. Every week, in every organisation, brilliant people stand up and do exactly the same thing. So, when 72% of leaders know that objectives, focusing us on our destination, are important, why do they suffer from this? Today, we dig into the science together. Welcome to Unshakable Her, the podcast helping women in leadership build the influence, visibility and presence to make promotion inevitable. I'm your host, Caroline Esterson. Let's get started. Here's what you're getting today. 1, the neuroscience behind why information overload happens even when the presenter is absolutely brilliant. 2, a surprisingly simple strategic framework for designing a briefing that actually moves people. One you can write on Post-it notes and pop on your screen to remind you. And 3, if you lead a team or if you sit in meetings watching this happen to other people, you'll know exactly what to do about it and, just as importantly, what not to do. So, as we explored on Monday, if you have ever walked out of a briefing you gave and thought, not sure that landed the way I wanted, it's not a confidence problem or even a preparation problem. It's a thinking problem. And the thinking happens before you even stand up. The science today is going to explain 3 things that are happening in that room that nobody's telling you about. The science bit, because facts beat fear every time. So let me talk to you about 3 things today. 2 are about your brain and 1 is about your audience's brain that you really need to understand. First, we have the curse of knowledge, and boy, it really is a curse. I'm sorry, but it is. There's a cognitive bias called the curse of knowledge. It was named by economists Colin Camara and George Lowenstein and Martin Webb in 1989. And here is what it means in plain English. Once you know something, you can't unknow it, and you can't remember what it felt like not to know it. That is why experts notoriously brief badly. The more you know, the harder it becomes to model what the audience does not yet hold. You've lost access to the experience of not knowing. So you brief from where you are, not from where they are. And you dump everything because you know what? From your position, it all feels necessary. And often it also feels exciting to you. It's your stuff, isn't it? Chip and Dan Heath describe what they call the tap experiment. In this experiment, one person taps out the rhythm of a well-known song on a table. They are convinced the other person can almost hear the song because they can hear it in their heads. But contrary to their opinion, the listener hears nothing but random tapping. You know, it's the same with Chinese whispers, isn't it? The tapper is always shocked that they can't hear it. This experiment is the curse of knowledge in real time. Now, let's focus on the brain and explore the cognitive load. The brain's working memory can hold roughly 4 chunks of information at any one time. I want you to remember that number 4 for next time you're running any kind of briefing. This comes from Nelson Cowan's 2001 research building on George Miller's earlier work. You might know it as Miller's Law. Every slide or piece of information you add beyond what is necessary just isn't adding value. It's competing with the information you actually need people to retain. The brain doesn't store more when it's given more. It actually stores less. It starts triaging. It decides what's signal and what's noise. And if you've not told it what to look for, it'll make that decision on its own. And you know what? It will almost always decide that most of what you're saying is frankly background noise. Jamie from Risk was not being rude when he checked his phone on slide 8. His brain had already made a decision that nothing essential was coming. And there's something else happening that nobody is talking about in the context of briefings, and it's the most contemporary problem on the list. Working memory holds roughly 4 chunks. But you know what? That was before we spent a decade training our brains on short form content. Your audience's attention is under siege before they walk through the door, which means your job just got a whole lot harder. The only answer is absolute clarity about what you need them to hold on to. This means your job as a briefer has become harder since Cohen published his research. And the only real answer is that clarity about what you need them to hold. Because if you don't tell them exactly what to look for, their brain will make that decision in about 8 seconds. And it might not be what you want it to be. You are leaving this opportunity for influence completely to chance. Now let's move on to talk about our own state as the person at the front of the room and how this leads to the data dump. When we're nervous, we fill space. We provide more words, more data, more slides. Because you know what? Silence just feels exposing. Simplicity feels risky. What if they ask a question I can't answer? What if I've not covered enough? What if they think I don't understand this? The data dump is often not about the audience at all. It is self-soothing for the presenter. Every extra slide is a small act of self-protection. It provides you with armor. Yet understanding this is the first step to designing briefings that serve your audience rather than your anxiety. And there's one more thing happening in that room that is often missed as part of this anxiety. The presenter finishes. They say thank you. Phew. They hand over to the next person. Job done, or so it feels. But here's what's happened in the brain of every person in that room. Nothing was consolidated. The information is still sitting in working memory, unprocessed and unanchored. And the moment the next presenter opens their mouth, that new information doesn't sit alongside the previous content. It sits on top of it. And what gets remembered is almost always the last thing said. The transfer from working memory to stored memory requires a beat, even if it's just 30 seconds, where the audience does something with what they've just heard. Maybe you ask a question, you consolidate with a sentence, a moment to connect it to something they already know. Without that beat, the brief technically happened, but in terms of what the room retained and can act on, well, it might well as not. It often is just a waste of time and effort. The handover is not the end of your job. It's the moment most presenters abandon the audience, right when the audience needs them most. Remember these 3 things as your silver bullets: outcome, priming, and anchoring. Outcome is what you load the room with before you begin, the clear destination you want them to reach. Priming is how you deliver it, the framing at the start that tells the brain what to filter for and why it matters. And anchoring is what completes the circuit at the end, the consolidation beat that transfers what the brain has been holding into something it can actually keep and act on. Priming without anchoring leaves the channel open. Anchoring without outcome gives people nothing to consolidate. All 3 together is a briefing that does its job from the very first word to the very last. 1 at the front, 1 throughout, and 1 at the close. The benefits I give you at the top of every episode, that's priming in action. You already know what it feels like. When people know what they're supposed to be doing with information as they receive it, i.e. the outcome you want, retention increases significantly. The brain filters for relevance. It's looking for hooks to hand things on. If you tell the room at the start, by the end of this, I want you to have agreed X, every piece of information that follows gets filtered through that lens. The relevant bits stick and the rest falls away cleanly. If you don't tell them, they will decide for themselves what they're supposed to be doing, and they will almost always decide that they're there to listen politely and then get back to their actual day job. That's what priming is all about, telling people what you want them to focus on. Not the club, just bad processes. The system's the problem, not you. Let's fix it for you and the next one in. None of what I just described is about people being bad at their jobs. Cara isn't bad at her job. Simone's not bad at her job. The organisation they work in has just never taught either of them how to brief. Presentation skills training exists and most leaders have done some version of it, but it focuses on the formal stuff, things like slides, structure, confidence, body language, maybe how to stand, how to answer questions. It rarely makes the connection to the things leaders are actually doing every day, the briefing, the cross-functional update, the corridor conversation that shapes a decision. That thinking, the thinking that happens before the room, is treated as a soft skill people should just absorb through osmosis. In reality, it's a design discipline. When organisations don't teach it, every individual in every room gets to reinvent the wheel alone, and often usually badly, usually under pressure, and probably at 7 o'clock the night before. And let's be clear, focusing on slides is the natural thing to do. It's logical, right? You can see the outcome clearly of whether your slide is a good one or not, which is why people spend most of their time there rather than anywhere else. And I want to pause here. Let's be clear. No one on this planet says, "Ooh, I wish I could do more meetings." Do they? And the stats illuminate this even more. The numbers aren't subtle and they come from well-documented research. You ready for these? 70% of meeting decisions are forgotten within 24 hours without documented outcomes. 54% of workers leave meetings with no idea what to do next or who owns what. And 72% of professionals say clear objectives are the single most important factor in an effective meeting. Yet the majority of meetings still don't have them. That last one is one worth sitting with, I think. People know what good looks like. They're just not doing it because nobody built it into the culture of the organisation. Those organisations that do, where every room starts with a stated outcome, not just a topic, don't need the stats because you can feel the difference. There are faster decisions, fewer follow-up meetings about the meeting, and people leave the meeting knowing what just happened. Now, as ever, you can't fix the whole organisation, can you? But you can fix how you show up in your bit of it, and the people around you will start to notice. As usual on a Wednesday, I've got 3 questions for you now to help you process what we've just talked about. 1, when was the last time you briefed your team with a clear stated outcome at the start? Not a topic, an outcome. Not, we're going to talk about quarter 3, but more like, by the end of this, I need us to have decided X. 2, if you had to cut your next briefing by 40%, what would survive? That is probably your actual briefing. The rest is context you needed in order to build the thing, not context they need in order to use it. And 3, are you watching people on your team brief badly and saying nothing? What's the cost of that silence? To them, to the audience, to the culture that you're trying to build. Before we finish up, let me give you a real life example. I was running a virtual briefing for an innovation project team at a luxury fashion brand recently. The finance director was on the call. He said nothing throughout the discussion in the main group, although I knew he was being really active in the breakout rooms, for which I was incredibly grateful. But he did stay on afterwards, waiting for everyone to leave the room. And he asked me 2 questions with genuine curiosity. The first was, why do you stand up when you deliver virtually? And the second was, how do you plan your structure so that people can move so quickly to actions? I never seem to be able to do that. And I'd like to just sit with those 2 questions for a second, because they're not small questions, are they? The first one, why do you stand up? Well, it has 2 benefits. One is about what your physical presence signals to the room. Standing is not about formality. It's about intention. It says, I'm here to direct this, not to participate in it. I know where we're going. Follow me. The room feels that before you say a word. And secondly, it helps your energy as your blood can flow more freely around your body and up to your brain than if you were slumped at your desk, frankly. The second question, how do you get to action so quickly? This is the whole of this trilogy in one question. You get to action quickly because you started with the action. You knew before you opened your mouth what you needed the room to do when you were done. Everything else, every piece of information, every slide, every transition was in service of that. Cut everything that wasn't. Now, this finance director had watched me brief outcome first and felt the difference in the room. He just didn't have the language for it yet. But now you do. Okay, let's visit the 3 things I promised you right at the start. First up, the science. We explored the curse of knowledge, cognitive load, anxiety as self-soothing, and how to combat these with outcome clarity and priming. 3 completely distinct things happening in that room that had nothing to do with how hard Cara worked or how prepared she was. Then the framework. I positioned it as a strategic framework, which frankly sounds very grand, doesn't it? And you're probably expecting a handout in the show notes, but I also said it was surprisingly simple and could be written on a post-it note, which it can. It's strategic because it's about how you change the culture and the value of meetings in your organisation. But it's simple because it is just 3 questions to ask yourself before you touch a slide. What do I need them to think, feel, and do? We introduced you to this a couple of weeks ago, and this week we put it into a stronger context for you. And then thirdly, what to do if you lead a team. Remember, briefing is a design principle. Teach it, model it, and ask the 40% question. If you had to cut your briefing by 40%, what would you cut? Often, the rest is just padding. Apply it to your own meetings before you ask it about anybody else's. Now, we started this episode and all episodes with priming, the outcome and benefits of what we're exploring. So what do we call the reflection we've just done? Well, that's consolidation. It's anchoring a reminder of what we explored to help you link it with the questions so you can apply it all the more easily and do something about what you've listened to. On Friday, we're going to make this practical. You'll get the consolidation moves, the ones that take 30 seconds and make the difference between a brief that lands and one that gets overwritten before the next presenter even sits down. That is your cheat sheet moment. That's it for today. Before you go, if something in this episode made you think, that's why I do that, hit follow wherever you're listening, because that moment of recognition, that's where Unshakable starts. Remember, I'm in your corner. See you Friday.